The sound of your own power. What if the loudest message you could ever send was silence? No texts, no calls, no explanations, just quiet, deliberate, disciplined, quiet. There's something haunting about that, isn't there? Because in a world that never stops talking, the one who chooses silence holds the real power. Welcome to Ancient Stoic Secrets, where we don't chase noise, we study truth. Where every loss becomes a lesson, and every silence becomes strength. Let me tell you a story. There was a man once, maybe someone like you, who gave everything he had to someone who stopped listening. He explained, he apologized, he waited, until one day, he didn't. He stopped responding. No drama, no long messages, just ... disappeared. And that silence, it spoke louder than anything he could have said. Because real silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's the moment you stop chasing validation and start reclaiming yourself. It's not about revenge. It's about respect for your energy, your peace, your worth. See, most people panic when they lose attention. They scroll, they post, they reach out, desperate to fill the void. But a Stoic man understands. You don't fill the silence, you become it. He knows that when words would only weaken him, silence will strengthen him. He knows that when someone chooses distance, the most powerful thing you can do is let them feel it fully. Because silence is not weakness, it's discipline, it's mastery. It's the space where you stop trying to control what's gone and start building what's within. So if you've ever been left wondering, if you've ever felt that ache to explain yourself just one more time, ... pause, don't text, don't beg, don't chase, let your absence speak. Because sometimes the man who says nothing ends up saying everything. This is the power of silence. And today, we're going to explore how it transforms pain into presence, and heartbreak into something unbreakable. Stay with me. Let's begin. The power of silence. When walking away says everything, or shorter version for thumbnail. Silence is the ultimate response. Rewritten intro script approx. 3 minutes. What if the loudest message you could ever send was silence? No texts, no calls, no explanations, just quiet, deliberate, disciplined, quiet. There's something haunting about that, isn't there? Because in a world that never stops talking, the one who chooses silence holds the real power. Welcome to Ancient Stoic Secrets, where we don't chase noise, we study truth. Where every loss becomes a lesson, and every silence becomes strength. Let me tell you a story. There was a man once, maybe someone like you, who gave everything he had to someone who stopped listening. He explained, he apologized, he waited. Until one day, he didn't. He stopped responding. No drama, no long messages, just ... disappeared. And that silence, it spoke louder than anything he could have said. Because real silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's the moment you stop chasing validation and start reclaiming yourself. It's not about revenge. It's about respect for your energy, your peace, your worth. See, most people panic when they lose attention. They scroll, they post, they reach out, desperate to fill the void. But a Stoic man understands. You don't fill the silence, you become it. He knows that when words would only weaken him, silence will strengthen him. He knows that when someone chooses distance, the most powerful thing you can do is let them feel it fully. Because silence is not weakness, it's discipline, it's mastery. It's the space where you stop trying to control what's gone and start building what's within. So if you've ever been left wondering, if you've ever felt that ache to explain yourself just one more time, ... pause, don't text, don't beg, don't chase, let your absence speak. Because sometimes the man who says nothing ends up saying everything. This is the power of silence. And today, we're going to explore how it transforms pain into presence, and heartbreak into something unbreakable. Stay with me. Let's begin. 1. The shock of silence. When you stop talking, something unexpected happens. At first, it's quiet, almost peaceful. But soon, that silence starts echoing in places you never noticed before. She checks her phone. No message. She posts a story. No reaction. She tells herself, you'll reach out eventually. Because that's what most men do. They chase, they explain, they fight for closure. But you don't, you stay silent. And suddenly, that silence becomes louder than any argument could have been. It's not the kind of silence that says, I don't care. It's the kind that says, I care, just not at the cost of my peace. Because when you walk away without a storm, without anger, you break the pattern her mind is conditioned to expect. And the human mind hates broken patterns. We all do. We replay what we don't understand. We obsess over what doesn't make sense. That's why silence hits harder than words ever could. It leaves space, a space her thoughts will fill with 1,000 questions. Did he move on? Does he still care? Why didn't he say anything? That's the paradox. When you say nothing, your silence starts saying everything. But this isn't about punishing her. It's not about making her chase you back. It's about teaching yourself something deeper, that you can survive without being heard, that you can stand tall without being seen, that your worth doesn't vanish when someone walks away. Most men confuse noise with strength. They think fighting harder means caring more. But sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is let go quietly, completely, and allow your absence to speak for you. Because silence, when rooted in self-respect, isn't a void. It's a boundary. It says, my peace is not up for negotiation. And when you master that, you stop chasing closure, because you become the closure. 2. The discipline of stillness. Let's be honest, silence isn't easy. It takes strength to hold back when your mind screams to reach out. It takes courage to say nothing when your heart still cares. Anyone can send that one last message. Anyone can scroll through old photos at midnight and convince themselves, maybe if I just explain a little more. But a Stoic man knows discipline isn't about feeling nothing. It's about not letting feelings decide everything. He understands that emotions are like waves. You can't stop them from coming, but you can learn not to drown in them. So instead of reacting, he observes. Instead of chasing, he builds. Instead of explaining, he evolves. Because silence is not just about cutting someone off, it's about tuning back in. To yourself, that's when transformation begins. When you take all the energy you used to spend trying to be understood, and you use it to understand yourself. You hit the gym, not to prove a point, but to rebuild discipline. You wake up early, not to post about it, but to master your mornings. You read, reflect, journal, not to impress anyone, but to sharpen your mind. That's how silence becomes sacred. It stops being a punishment and starts being a practice. And while the world wonders why you disappeared, you're too busy reappearing in your work, your health, your peace. You see, Stoicism isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about caring deeply but only about what's within your control. Her choices, out of your control. Your reactions, entirely yours. The moment you realize that difference, you stop being at war with life. You stop chasing what left and start creating what stays. And here's the irony, the quieter you become, the louder your growth speaks. Because real power doesn't need an audience. It just needs consistency. So, if you're sitting in silence right now, wondering if she notices, stop wondering. Start building. Because the day will come when your silence won't just be noticed, it'll be felt. Not by her, but by you, in the calm, the strength, and the quiet pride of a man who no longer needs to be heard to be understood. 3. When silence becomes transformation, there's a point in every man's silence when the pain finally shifts. At first, it feels like emptiness, like you've lost something that defined you. But with time, you realize that emptiness was space being cleared. Space for discipline. Space for clarity. Space for the man you were meant to become. See, silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's the beginning of rebuilding. When you stop reaching outward, you finally start looking inward. That's where real transformation begins. Think about it. Every minute you used to spend checking your phone, you now spend checking your goals. Every ounce of energy you used to waste replaying old memories, you invest into creating new ones. And every time you choose not to respond, you teach yourself one powerful truth. Your peace is your responsibility. The world doesn't owe you understanding. People will leave. They will misunderstand you. They will write stories in their heads about who you are. But none of that defines you. What defines you is how you respond when everything goes quiet. Because in that silence, you meet the version of yourself that no one else ever sees. The one who keeps showing up, even when no one is watching. That's where true Stoic strength is born. Not in what you say, but in what you withhold. Not in how loudly you fight, but in how calmly you rebuild. There's a kind of man who disappears not to escape the world, but to refine himself. He doesn't announce his growth, he doesn't post about his healing. He lets time, effort, and peace speak for him. And when he reappears, months, maybe years later, he's unrecognizable. Not because he became someone new, but because he finally became himself. That's the true beauty of silence. It doesn't just distance you from others, it reconnects you with your essence. So, if you're in that season right now, the quiet one, don't rush it. Don't try to fill it with noise. Let it do its work. Because silence is the sculptor that shapes your soul when the world stops watching. For the freedom of letting go, there's something liberating about not needing to be understood anymore. When you stop explaining yourself, you start experiencing yourself. That's what silence teaches. It's not about pride. It's about peace. You learn that closure doesn't come from her apology. It comes from your acceptance. You stop asking, why did she leave? And start asking, what did this teach me? And suddenly, the story changes. You're no longer the man who was left. You're the man who rose from what was left behind. Letting go is never easy. It's like trying to release something that once felt like oxygen. But here's the thing. What if the very thing you were clinging to was the reason you couldn't breathe? When you stop holding on, you make room for air again, for clarity, for freedom, for strength. That's the Stoic paradox. The less you try to control, the more control you gain over yourself. And the moment you no longer need to be chosen, you become unforgettable. Because peace, real peace, is magnetic. It doesn't chase, it attracts, it doesn't shout, it radiates. So when she scrolls through her phone months later, wondering where you went, she won't find your name in her notifications, but she feel your absence like gravity. Not because you wanted her to regret, but because you chose to rise instead of react. That's what makes silence powerful. It turns endings into beginnings, and pain into wisdom. And when you reach that place where you no longer need validation, where you no longer fight to be seen, you realize the silence you gave the world was never about them. It was about you, your rebirth, your freedom. So let go, not in anger, but in clarity. Not to prove something, but to protect your peace. Because in the end, silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of strength. 5. The legacy of silence. At some point, silence stops being something you do and starts becoming something you are. It's no longer about ignoring anyone. It's about mastering yourself. You walk through your days with a calm that confuses people. You don't rush to explain. You don't react to every little thing. You've learned that peace is expensive and not everyone can afford your energy. There's a power in that kind of quiet. Not the cold kind that shuts people out, but the grounded kind that says, I know who I am, and I don't need to prove it. When you reach that point, something shifts in how the world sees you. People feel your presence before you speak. They sense the steadiness in you, the discipline, the restraint, the kind of strength that doesn't need noise to exist. And ironically, that's when life starts giving back. Opportunities come, respect follows. Even those who once doubted you start to wonder how you built this kind of calm. The answer? You built it in the silence they never saw. While others were posting, you were practicing. While others were chasing attention, you were chasing mastery. While others were explaining their worth, you were becoming worthy in private. That's what Stoicism truly is. Not ancient quotes on a wall, but a quiet decision, made every day, to control yourself when life tempts you to lose control. And maybe that's the lesson silence was trying to teach you all along. That you never needed closure from anyone else. You just needed to close the gap between who you were and who you were meant to be. Think about it. Every great man you admire, whether he's a philosopher, a leader, a builder, they all shared one thing in common. They learned to be still. They learned that when the world grows loud, clarity hides in quiet. So when you stop chasing noise, you finally start hearing your own voice again. And that voice, the one that whispers, you're enough. Keep going. That's the sound of strength. That's the music of freedom. Because the man who can walk away completely isn't just silent. He's free. 6. The quiet strength of a grounded man. There comes a moment when silence stops being about anyone else and becomes a reflection of the man you've become. You're no longer quiet because you're hurt. You're quiet because you've healed. You've outgrown the need to prove your worth through words. You've learned that the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest one, and that true confidence doesn't need to announce itself. It's strange how life changes once you stop reacting. Conversations that used to drain you now pass right through you. People who once triggered you no longer hold that power. And the peace you used to chase in others now lives quietly within you. That's not coldness, that's clarity. That's emotional maturity, because silence isn't about shutting down, it's about tuning in. It's about learning to listen to what really matters, your thoughts, your values, your instincts. Most of us spend years trying to make noise, to be seen, to be understood, to be accepted. But have you ever noticed that the people who truly move the world rarely shout? They move quietly. They speak when necessary, and when they do, the world listens because their words are backed by stillness, not desperation. That's what Stoicism teaches. Stillness is strength in motion. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about mastering the response. It's about knowing that when life provokes you, you don't need to flinch. You can pause, you can breathe, you can choose. Because silence is not the absence of reaction, it's the presence of control. And in a world that glorifies speed, noise, and attention, there's something almost revolutionary about a man who moves slowly, thinks deeply, and speaks rarely, but meaningfully. When you reach that point, you stop chasing people who misunderstand your silence. You stop explaining your boundaries. You simply live them. And that's when you realize peace isn't something you find out there. Peace is what you protect in here. So the next time someone mistakes your silence for indifference, smile, because they don't realize that your quiet isn't emptiness, it's mastery. The sound of your own power. You know what's beautiful about silence? It's not the quiet itself. It's who you become inside it. Because at some point, every man faces that choice. Do I chase noise, or do I build peace? Do I keep trying to be understood, or do I finally understand myself? That's what silence reveals. Not weakness, not loneliness, but a deep kind of power, the kind that can't be taken, can't be faked, and doesn't need permission to exist. Maybe right now you're walking through that silence, the kind that feels heavy, unfamiliar, almost endless. But let me remind you of something the Stoics knew. The weight you feel today is the strength you'll carry tomorrow. Pain doesn't last, discipline does. And the man who can stand in stillness without breaking will never again need to beg for peace. So take a breath. Let the noise fade, because your silence, your calm, your discipline, that's the beginning of a new story. Not a story of loss, but of rebirth. Not about who left, but about who you've become. And when you rise from this silence, you'll carry something the world can't touch. A quiet confidence that speaks without words. Here's the truth. The world doesn't need louder men. It needs wiser ones, men who can lead with peace, men who don't crumble under chaos, men who understand that stillness is strength. If that's the kind of man you're becoming, you're in the right place. Welcome to Ancient Stoic Secrets. This is more than a channel. It's a brotherhood of men, rebuilding in silence, rising with purpose, and walking with calm that can't be shaken. If today's message spoke to you, if it reminded you that peace is power, that silence can heal, and that you don't need to shout to be strong, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if it lit a spark in you, and subscribe, not just to follow another channel, but to join a movement of men choosing clarity over chaos, purpose over pain, and silence over noise. Because together, we're not escaping the world, we're mastering it, one moment of stillness at a time. So remember this, you don't have to speak to make an impact. Sometimes the most powerful message you can ever give is the one you deliver in silence. Thank you for watching, stay grounded, stay disciplined, and as always, walk with peace.